Last day of June. The 30th. Moon's definitely into the fourth quarter. Sky is got clouds. They've been diminishing all day, so I kind of anticipate that I'm going to be able to do some astro tonight. Ooh, is that overexposed on the camera? That's because the camera is set up to image the screen on the scope. Maybe we'll get a clearer image now. Yes, we did. I parked the scope in the zenith position. I intend to get out a little bit early and make sure I do a multi-point star alignment with some mechanical adjustments to right ascension and declination. Right now I've got the bubble levels pretty much leveled out. I'll start at this position here. We'll see where it goes from there. The plan for tonight is to tour studies, NGCs and ICs, along the meridian plane that bisects the Milky Way galaxy. And that'll run, by the time I start, from due south in Scorpio, or Scorpius, through Sagittarius, on up through Serpens, and Scutum. It'll go up to Altair, past Altair to Cygnus and Lacerda as it wanders north, and I hope to get a few studies in, ultimately, in Cepheus. However, I'm going to be pretty much restricted to about 30 studies that will be culminating towards the south in Scorpius and Sagittarius. So that is the plan. Okay, it's about 10, let's see, look at the handset, 10, 14, and 30 seconds. And we are centering on Antares to get our start at what is going to be a tour along the central plane of the great Milky Way galaxy. So we're going to stay probably within 5 degrees either side, to the east or the west, of the plane of the Milky Way. And that plane begins in the tail of the Scorpion and then heads north. And by the end of this project, which will probably take 3 nights of imaging, we should be approaching Cepheus on our way to Cassiopeia, which is the peak northern constellation of the Milky Way before it dips down and heads south towards the southern hemisphere, passing through a number of constellations, finally ending in Monoceros in the wintertime. So here is where I hope most of these studies will turn up on the screen. I have synchronized the mount to Antares in the south. Not a whole lot to see here. We're beginning with NGC 6334. It's a nebulosity in Scorpius. Very large, 120 by 110 arc minutes in size. It's an emissive type nebula located 5,700 light years distant. We're at right ascension 172049, declination minus 360612. All we are seeing here is a brightest star with a number of artifacts on the screen. We're probably a little too far south. We may be looking through some branches of the tree. We're down near Shaula in the very Scorpion's tail. And all we're going to get out of this view is just to know that there is an NGC 6334 at right ascension and declination, as mentioned earlier. Heading north a little ways from 6334 is NGC 6335. It's a group of stars in Scorpius. There's no information available. Apparently it's somewhat of an anomalous study. We're at right ascension 17, 19, 31, but further north, a declination minus 30, 09, 48. And I've got all of these studies by perusing the Wiltarian star charts So, and as I mentioned, we're trying to stay pretty much along the plane, mid-plane of the Milky Way galaxy. And much of that mid-plane, like in many galaxies, is comprised of dark obscuration nebula. So we're going to be heading probably to the east and west for most of these studies, although one study that I turned up is pretty much right along the actual axis, and I may have to make a note of that later. NGC 6357, nebulosity in Scorpius, smaller than the first one, 50 by 40 arc minutes, emissive type 3,900 light years distant, right ascension 1724.43, declination minus 34.1206. One thing you will note throughout the evening, the right ascension will progress because the Milky Way is kind of tilted in the east-west axis across the sky, as you might guess, because we're beginning in Scorpius and ending up as far north as Cassiopeia, although we won't get anywhere near that tonight. However, we are getting a decent view of that nebulosity there, NGC 6357. Good to actually see something on the screen, even though we're at minus 34 degrees, 12 minutes, and 0.6 seconds in declination. Our next study, NGC 6383, an open cluster in Scorpius, is AKA 6374. And one of the things of note about it is one of the closest of all the NGC studies along the midline of the galactic plane. The cluster overall is magnitude 5.5, 20 arc minutes in size, consisting of some 40 stars, the brightest of which is magnitude 10.2. It is a class Roman numeral 4-3, so the stars are fairly spread apart and they are of various magnitudes. I do believe this is probably the 10th magnitude star right there, and it does seem to have a neighbor very close to it right at that location there. So we're just having a look at NGC 6383, the closest NGC study to the mid-plane of our Milky Way galaxy of this particular evening. Not much to be seen on the screen here. What I'd hoped to turn up was an open cluster, NGC 6400 in Scorpius, magnitude 8.8, 12 arc minutes, 60 stars, the brightest of which is magnitude 9. I can only suspect that we are being blocked. It's a class Roman numeral 2, so a middling kind of cluster, 3,100 million light years distant. It's at right ascension 1740.12 and declination minus 36.56.54. NGC 6404 is another open cluster in Scorpius, fainter, magnitude 10.6, and small, 5 arc minutes, some 50 stars. It's a class Roman numeral 3, 7,800 light years distant, right ascension 1739.37, minus 33 degrees 14 minutes and 48 seconds. Once again, all we can do is get a sense of the data associated with this far southern cluster. Well, we are starting to see something of this cluster. It's NGC 6405, open cluster in Scorpius. It's also known as Messier 6. Magnitude 4.2, 20 arc minutes in size with some 80 stars. Should fill the screen, and it does. Magnitude 6.2, it's a class 3, 2. So stars are spread out, but they're roughly of the same magnitude overall. Not the tightest magnitude in delta, but close to it. 1,600 light years distant. We're at right ascension 1740-20, declination minus 3215-12, and we will probably come back and revisit some of these earlier clusters in Scorpius later as they culminate to the south. Once again, we're not getting much of a view. This is supposed to be NGC 6416, open cluster in Scorpius. It's magnitude 5.7, 14 arc minutes in size, some 40 stars, the brightest of which is magnitude 8.4. Doesn't look much like that, does it? Excuse me. Right ascension 1744-19, declination minus 3221-42. And once again, I repeat, our right ascension is going to continue to increase in hours as we progress through the NGC catalog and as we move along the plane of the Milky Way galaxy. Well, another hard to pick out cluster, probably blocked by the trees since it's at minus 31 degrees. This is NGC, or should be NGC 6425, an open cluster in Scorpius. Magnitude 7.2, 10 arc minutes in size with some 35 stars, brightest of which is magnitude 10.1. It's a class 1-1, so we should be looking for something really tight. 10 arc minutes in size. Stars should all be of similar magnitude. They should be pretty closely clumped. 2,500 light years distant. Right ascension 17 hours 47 minutes and 1 second. Minus 31 degrees 31 minutes and 48 seconds. And you can get a hint of a cluster right in the center of the screen. NGC 6441 should be our first globular cluster of the evening. Once again, we're getting blockage to the south in Scorpius, magnitude 7.4, 7.8 arc minutes, magnitude 15.4. It is a class 3, so fairly compact globular, except 32,000 light years distant. We're at right ascension 1750-13, declination minus 370303. Once again, likely to be getting some kind of blockage on the screen. Well, we are now getting a very decent view. We've exited Scorpius for the time being. We're now in Sagittarius for NGC 6445, a planetary nebula, magnitude 13, 35 by 30 arc seconds in size. Central star is a magnitude 19. Planetary is located 4,500 light years distant, has a right ascension of 17 hours 49 minutes and 15 seconds, and yahoo, a declination of minus 20 degrees 36 seconds. There is a very interesting view of an extremely irregular looking planetary, but I would say we're probably seeing this one in profile rather than seeing it along the axis of the poles, which probably explains its rather unusual presentation. Very nice view. Heading back down into Scorpius for NGC 6451, an open cluster. Total combined magnitude of all of its stars, magnitude 8.2, smallish, 8 arc minutes in size with some 80 stars, the brightest of which is magnitude 12. Getting some smearage on the screen. It is a class 2-1, which means the stars are probably a pretty proximal magnitude, but a little more just widely spread out. 6,800 light years distant. Its right ascension is 1750-41, declination minus 30 degrees, 12 minutes and 36 seconds, and it has sharpened up on the screen and looks very, very nice. I do like this cluster. NGC 6453 is another scratch on the screen. It's supposed to be a globular cluster in Scorpius. Magnitude 10.2, smallest 3.5 arc minutes, class 4, so fairly compact, more towards the compact of the loosely aggregated stars, 36,000 light years distant. Right ascension 17, 50, 51, declination 34, 35, 54. And as I said, we're not seeing much on the screen. I hope you're not disappointed with all these deep south studies. If possible, I'll come back and review a few of them later. Okay, we've seen this cluster before, previous evenings. It's NGC 6494, open cluster in Sagittarius, otherwise known as Messier 23. Total magnitude 5.5, 27 arc minutes in size, well populated with 150 stars, the brightest of which are magnitude 9.2, and it is a class Roman numeral 3, which probably means spread out, but all the stars are very similar magnitude, class 1, numeric 1. 2,000 light years distant, right ascension 175704, declination minus 185906, and a good look. Here we have a nebula and open cluster that needs little introduction in Sagittarius. NGC 6514 is also Messier 20, magnitude 6.3, 28 arc minutes in size with some 67 stars. The brightest star is magnitude 6, which you can see right at the middle of the Trifid Nebula. It's an emissive type nebulosity, 2,700 light years distant, right ascension 1802.42, and declination minus 22.58.18. A very nice look with plenty of interesting texture and color distribution, from a kind of a pinkish purple to a faint blue, and that blue is pervasive in various degrees of intensity all over the screen. NGC 6520 is a nice tight open cluster in Sagittarius. Magnitude 7.6, 6 arc minutes in size, 60 stars, the brightest of which are magnitude 9. It is a class 1-2, 5,300 light years distant. That's Roman numeral 1, which means it's fairly compact, and the stars as a 2 are roughly of a similar magnitude, but not quite. Right ascension 1803.24 and declination minus 27.53.18. And I remind folks that we are tracking down studies this evening in the deep south of the Milky Way that are within 5 or so degrees of the galactic mid-plane. So that is the theme of this night's studies. NGC 6522 is a globular cluster in Sagittarius, faintish, magnitude 9.9, smallish, 5.6 arc minutes in size. The brightest stars are magnitude 14.1. It suffers, however, from its declination of minus 30 degrees, 2 minutes and 06 seconds, has a right ascension of 1803.35, and you'll notice we progressed from right ascension somewhere around 1715 all the way up to 1800, some 45 minutes later, which accounts for about 10 degrees of drift as we've headed north. But notice we're at minus 30, so it's going to be a bit of a ways away from the galactic plane. Here we have a nice view of the Lagoon Nebula and cluster. NGC 6523 in Sagittarius, aka Messier 8, total magnitude of 5, 45 by 30 arc minute, emissive type nebulosity, 4,300 light years distant. We're at right ascension 1803.41 and declination minus 24.22.48. And we're very thankful that we're not so far north that we're not getting a very excellent view of this beautiful star-forming region. nearish to the galactic plane of the Milky Way. Here we see a faintish deep south globular cluster, NGC 6528 globular cluster in Sagittarius, magnitude 9.5, 3.7 arc minutes with the brightest stars of magnitude 15.5. We do not expect to resolve any of those stars given our deep south location. It's a class 5, which means sort of middling in terms of stellar density, 24,000 light years distant. We're at right ascension 1804.49, declination minus 30 degrees 0321, and as we have learned from earlier explorations this evening, minus 30 degrees without culminating can be very challenging to pick up, but we are getting a sense of that globular's presence in the middle of the screen. Here we have an adventitious star cluster with some nebulosity, although it looks a bit like the lagoon. This is an open cluster, NGC 6530, magnitude 4.6, 15 arc minutes in size, and the brightest stars are magnitude 6.9. It's a class Roman numeral 2, 4,300 light years distant. This was not on my list, but it does look to fall within the 5-degree parameter of the galactic plane. It's a right ascension 1804.31 and minus 24 degrees 21 minutes and 30 seconds. It's an interesting open cluster, and it's not quite immersed in the lagoon, but it certainly looks like it's associated with it. Here we have another nice star formed region, open cluster in Sagittarius, magnitude 6531 NGC. It's also Messier 21, 5.9 magnitude, 13 arc minutes in size with 70 stars, the brightest of which are magnitude 7.3. It's a class 1, 3. So I would say the class 1 Roman numeral is the fact the stars are of similar magnitude, and the 3 represents how spread out they are. At a distance of 3,900 light years distant, we're at right ascension 1804.13, declination minus 22, 29, 24. Interesting. Here's another view of the Lagoon Nebula, but however, this is NGC 6533 and captures both the nebula and the open cluster in Sagittarius. This is adventitious. 90 by 40 arc minute emissive, 4,300 light years distant, right ascension 1804.06, minus 24:23 minutes and 0 seconds. It also lies within the bounds of our parameters for this evening near the galactic plane. But it gives us a good view of the nebulosity and the cluster all at once. Wow. This may be the faintest globular cluster I've ever attempted to image. It's NGC 6540 in Sagittarius, magnitude 14.6, small, 0.8 arc minutes. It's a class 11, which means the stars are very disparately grouped. 11,000 light years distant. Hard to believe that close and that faint. Could be something wrong with this data. Right ascension 1806.08, declination minus 27:45.50. If we're getting any sense of a cluster on that screen, I would be surprised, but everything's been turning up pretty much at the center of the screen. It's a nice look of space up there, however, with stars of various magnitudes, none of them overpowering. So very intriguing to follow up on. I would recommend going to theskylive.com and having a look at this one for yourselves. Another globular cluster, this one's NGC 6544 in Sagittarius, bright-ish, magnitude 7.5, largish, 8.4 arc minutes. The brightest stars are magnitude 12.8. It's a class 9, so we're pushing it out to the more diffusely concentrated clusters. It almost looks like an open, doesn't it? 8,200 light years distant. It's at right ascension 1807.20 and declination minus 24:59.53, but a very aesthetically attractive look of the cluster plus all the neighboring stars found along the Milky Way's plane and not in a nebulous region. Here's another adventitious NGC 6546, an open cluster in Sagittarius. Did not turn this one up on the Tyrian guide, although it may have been there. Magnitude 8, 13 arc minutes in size, endowed with a number of stars, 150, brightest of which are magnitude 10.6. It's a class 3, 2. You can see they're spread out, but they are relatively of a similar magnitude. 3,100 light years distant, right ascension 1807.22, declination minus 23:17.48. A really rich region of stars in this screen. Here we have NGC 6553, a nice globular cluster in Sagittarius. Watch it develop on the screen. Magnitude 8.3, smallest 3.2 arc minutes, brightest stars, magnitude 15.3. It's a class 11, so fairly spread out. 15,000 light years distant, right ascension 1809.17, declination minus 25:54.30. And as I look at my next one, I'll see if we can get a little more resolution on this one. Let's make our next hop on an adventitious study. It looks like things have sharpened up reasonably well up there. NGC 6554 is an open cluster in Sagittarius, magnitude 12, not particularly well populated with a mere 20 stars. Its right ascension is 1809.24, declination minus 18:22.43. There's no distance indication here or description of the cluster. This looks to me like it's pretty much any region of the Milky Way galaxy where we do not have dark obscuration nebula along its plane. What we should see developing on the screen is some nebulosity, and I do believe it's apparent. Here we have NGC 6559. It's a nebula in Sagittarius. No ascription to any particular kind of open cluster. You can see the nebulosity vaguely. Its magnitude, it's no information about magnitude, but it's 5.4 arc minutes in size, emissive type, 5,000 light years distant. Right ascension 1809.56 and declination minus 24:06.23. A nice little sweep of nebulosity through here. Here we have NGC 6567, if you can make it out. It's a planetary nebula in Sagittarius, magnitude 11.5. Smallish, 11 by 7 arc seconds with a 15th magnitude central star, 11,800 light years distant. Boy, is that area of the Sagittarius packed with stars. Right ascension 1813.45 with a declination of minus 1904.34. Clearly it is near the galactic plane. NGC 6568 is an open cluster in Sagittarius, if you could pick it out. Magnitude 8.6, 13 arc minutes in size with some 50 stars. It is a Roman numeral 3, 1. So probably fairly widely spread apart, but similar magnitudes. 3,300 light years distant. Right ascension 1812.44. Declination minus 21:36.18. NGC 6578, another planetary nebula in Sagittarius, magnitude 13.1, 9 arc seconds in size. Central star of 15.7. 11,900 light years distant. Right ascension 1816.16, declination minus 20:27.02. NGC 6589 is a nebula in Sagittarius, 15 arc minutes inside, emissive 5,500 light years distant. There's no reference to the combined luminosity of this particular nebula. We're at right ascension 181653 and declination minus 194639. We are progressing to the north and to the east as we follow the galactic plane. I am seeing some nebulosity on the screen around here with these two stars here, maybe a little bit more there, but it is very subtle. NGC 6613 is an open cluster in Sagittarius, also known as Messier 18. Magnitude 6.99, arc minutes in size, 20 stars, brightest of which are magnitude 8.6. It's a class 2-3, 4,200 light years distant. Right ascension 181958, declination minus 170607. Fairly obvious cluster, and it's pretty clear that Charles Messier would have been able to detect it with his 3-inch long focused non-achromatic telescope. NGC 6645 is a pretty replete open cluster in Sagittarius. Magnitude 8.5, 10 arc minutes in size with some 40 stars, the brightest of which are magnitude 12. It's a class 3-1. All the stars look relatively of the same magnitude. 4,100 light years distant, right ascension 1832.37 with a declination of minus 16.530. We've headed about an hour in right ascension to the east and in declination of about 20 degrees since our very first study of the evening, which, by the way, I am going to make a leap back to just in case it managed to clear the trees and maybe capture a few more while I still have some battery life left in the Sony Handycam. Pretty replete stellar region before us, however. Well, this view of NGC 6888, Nebula in Cygnus, magnitude 10, 20 by 10 arc minute, emissive type, 4,800 light years distant, is better than the one we got last night because we're having a better night of seeing. In fact, last night I pumped up the sensitivity and the exposure time to the max and did not get the view we are getting now. So what a difference a sky night makes. NGC 6888 is at right ascension 1206, 38 degrees, 21 minutes and 17 arc seconds, or seconds in declination. Now I want to point out that this crescent nebula here, this emissive nebula, is within 5 degrees of the Milky Way's central region, and it will be included in a future study as part of this, but I did want to capture it for this evening so we can say aloha and carpe noctem with NGC 6888, right for us to appreciate and enjoy. Carpe noctem.